Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Kira decided to walk to work today. The weather is beautiful. The city bustles along at its own pace. She thinks about her presentation at the doctor's symposium coming up in 2 days. She doesn't like to attend such events, but her colleagues have long felt that no event would accomplish its goal without such a luminary of medicine. Kira often struggles before drafting her speech for such events. It can go beyond the role of a doctor and cross the line into humanity. This can be boring to listen to. It's much more interesting to watch the realization of such ideas, she thought, and suddenly saw a crowd of people near an unfinished high-rise building. There were ambulances, policemen taped all around, cameramen with cameras and gawkers streaming through their phones. What happened here? Kara asked a young man who was adjusting his camera phone. Some dude jumped off the roof. He was persuaded for 2 hours, but they couldn't save him. He crashed, the young man said indifferently. Kara had no sooner moved a couple of steps away than a girl with a microphone in her hand appeared in front of her. Excuse me, this is CCTV channel. Please tell me, did you have time to see what happened here? No, I was walking by. Witnesses say the young man jumped from the roof of this unfinished building and crashed. How do you feel about that? It's sad, I think. And do you think there was any chance for the special services to save him? If I said yes, then the rescuers are to blame for his death. If I say no, then what consequences do you think that entails? Kara posed a counter-question. I'm sorry, I'm asking the questions here. Society cares about people's opinions, not my views. So still, was there a chance of salvation or not? I refuse to answer that question. It's an ethically difficult subject. Excuse me, I have to go, Kira hurried off. Wait, what do you mean by ethically challenging? Is the death of young people so rare that it is now a taboo to discuss it? On the contrary, I think it should be talked about as much as possible. And before such young people have climbed onto the roofs of high-rises. In the early days of my medical career, I came face to face with a long story. I can't tell it all at once, so I prefer not to answer your question. That's interesting. Now, turn off the camera for a few minutes. The journalist turned to her cameraman. So you're a doctor and you know more about suicide than any of us. The journalist was persistent. You say you witnessed a story. I suggest you meet in the next few days and tell it to our viewers. How would you feel about that? Kira figured she had very little time in the next few days. She was already regretting that she had even entered into a conversation with this journalist. But immediately she remembered her impressions when those very events were happening around her. She had promised herself many times then that she would tell this story to everyone. And now it seemed the time had come. All right, I'll make time for it sometime, Kira said. They exchanged business cards, agreed to meet at the journalist's studio in 3 days, and parted ways. 3 days later, Kara came to the studio of SSTV channel. There were a lot of people in the hall. The journalist came out and said that mistakes were unacceptable, as it would be a live broadcast. Kara was now thinking about how to tell in such a way that nothing would be left out of the story. From the first minutes of her speech, there was silence in the hall. Further, we will tell all the events as it looked in the heads of the silently listening audience. On that fateful day, John was rushing towards his destiny. 2 years ago, he received his diploma, immediately got a job in a large company. During these 2 years, he managed to prove himself as an excellent financier. Recently, one of his boss's friends approached him and said, Efremov, I have been watching you for a long time. In your hands, any business is on fire. Isn't it time for you to step out of your comfort zone? What do you mean, Nathan? John asked. I am opening a new branch of my bank. I need a good, proven manager. I see potential in you and I recommend that you be interviewed by my human resources department. If they confirmed your candidacy, I will sign your appointment, said a big businessman in Nathan. For John, who had only recently been promoted to deputy manager at a bank, the offer came as a real surprise. He is happy that he has been able to grow so quickly to a level where he does not have to look for a place to grow and offers come to him. John told his manager about it. He regretted having to lose such a valuable specialist, but said he respected his choice. So there are no conflicts of interest or ethical issues. John can safely take a step forward to the top. The interview lasted quite a long time, but the outcome was favorable. Now they had to wait a couple of days for the company to make a final decision. The next day, Nathan called him personally and told him that he had approved his candidacy for the position of head of the bank's representative office. The first thing John did was to please his mother, who had invested so much in his son's success. He dialed her phone number and heard her voice. "Yes, son. Mom, I'm here with good news. God willing, you found a bride and are going to get married. Should I expect grandchildren?" she asked in her characteristic cheerful voice. "No, Mom. I've changed jobs. You know Gorodetsky, the millionaire. He owns the Rasfit Bank. So he opened a regional office in our city and appointed me director. Can you imagine? I already passed the interview. Gorodetsky himself called me personally and said he approved me for the position. I'm happy for you, son. I always knew that you would easily reach the highest peaks. So consider this your well-deserved success. Congratulations." "Thanks, Mom." Say hi to Dad. "Wait, son. A career is great, but you can't forget about your personal life. Your father and I have long dreamed of grandchildren. When are you going to take care of us?" Mother asked. "Mom, I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, but I haven't found the opportunity. Come on, you can tell me now. Do you have someone in mind? Why don't you introduce her to us?" "Yes, Mom, there is, but he's a guy, not a girl." "What? What are you talking about? Where does this obscurantism come from?" Mom started to get agitated, and John could barely contain his laughter. But he didn't manage it for long. Before his mother could be horrified, John was laughing into the phone, almost dropping the receiver. "I was kidding, Mom. What are you doing? How could you think that? Come on with your jokes to bring us to a heart attack faster than grandchildren. I've got a girlfriend. I'll soon get used to my new position, then I'll introduce her to you. She's a bit like you. I think you'll get along with her," John said. "Well, thank God. May you do well, son. Kisses, bye." "Bye, Mom." John hung up the phone and turned up the volume of the music in the car. There's so much to do, I should call Natalie, he thought. But that's when Natalie called. "Hey, what's up? How'd the interview go?" "Hi, honey. It went great. I already been assigned. I've had a couple of formalities for a couple of days, and I'll start the day after tomorrow." "Wow, congratulations." "Thank you, sweetie. And yes, I just talked to my mom. She's been asking about you for a while. She and Dad want to meet you. If anything, we'll have a family introduction party in a couple of months. How would you like that?" John asked. "That would be great. I hope they like me," said Natalie. "Of course they will. You have a lot in common with my mom." "Baby, what are you doing right now? Why don't we go out for dinner? I could pick you up in an hour, huh?" "I'd love to. I'm going to go get ready then." "Don't be late," Natalie said. "Okay, you wait, sweet," John said and hung up. The music was blaring throughout the car. John drove into the wind, imagining his bright future. He was already the director of the bank's representative office. His next step would be a place in the board of directors. He should be closer to it. Others dream of getting acquainted with him, and he himself turns to John. It's nice to be appreciated. John was immersed in his pleasant thoughts and occasionally ignored the rules of the road. He was sure that fate was always favorable to him. As he approached the intersection with the railroad, he reduced his speed, looked around, no obstacles in the way. Only on the right side of his path a dense lilac tree in bloom pleased his eyes. John stepped on the gas. Already in the next second, he heard the strongest rumble and felt that he was flying somewhere with the car. The lilac tree flashed before his eyes. Yes, the tree had blocked the railroad, and he didn't see the speeding train coming. By the time he realized it, it was too late. The insight came only for a moment, then consciousness plunged into darkness. The car flew off the road for dozens of meters, a couple of times overturned and stuck between old trees. It was lucky that the impact came to the rear of the car. Otherwise, the tragedy could not have been avoided. After a couple of minutes, passengers were passing. Cars stopped and came running to help. Someone climbed onto the body of the car and with great difficulty opened its door, dirtying his hands in John's warm blood. Alive, the people around him asked. The man felt for a pulse but couldn't seem to see if there was a chance. It seemed not. He's crushed pretty badly. We can't get him out now. It would take special rescue equipment to cut the hood off. We need to call a rescue team, the man said. John couldn't hear any more of this conversation. At the moment of impact, a dark tunnel instantly appeared before his eyes. Now he sees a light at its end and flies towards that light, hoping to get relief from some intense pressure in it. He flies as hard as he can, but it is as if the light is purposely moving away from him. He knows for sure that he will find relief in that light, but it seems a long way off. John regained consciousness in the hospital 2 weeks later. When he opened his eyes, he didn't immediately realize where he was or what had happened to him. It seemed to him that he had slept a long, restless sleep and woke up with great difficulty. His mother was sitting next to him. "Where am I? What's happened to me?" John asked, barely regaining the strength to speak. "You're all right now, son. You were in a car accident. Eyewitnesses said you were lucky. Rest up. Get your strength back," Mom said. For the next few days, John tossed between heaven and earth. Then he regained consciousness and became aware of the hospital walls. Then again plunged into the chaos and loud rumbling that had recently divided his life into before and after. It wasn't until a month later that his condition stabilized. Now he began to feel his back stiffen from the constant lying down. John finally felt he could move his arms on his own. Then he asked the doctor for permission to go for a walk. "I'm sorry, but in your case, you can't walk yet. The fact is that you've suffered a serious spinal injury. As a result, the nerve signals to your extremities are not flowing. This can cause your legs to be immobile," the doctor said. It was the worst thing John had ever heard in his life. Had he really become a cripple? But he didn't want to believe the doctor's words. He spent the rest of the day trying to move his legs, but nothing came of it. At night he lost sleep. The prospect of becoming an invalid completely paralyzed his thoughts. How could this be? What had he done to fate to be punished so cruelly? The treatment continued. By the end of the second month, John was feeling well, but movement to his legs had not returned. His mother and father were always at his side. They reassured him in every possible way, reassuring him that he would walk very soon. But these reassurances only remained words. John is now confined to a wheelchair. He had his first stroke a week after he was discharged from the hospital. Nathan personally visited him with gifts and then delicately hinted that his decision to approve John as director was being reversed. Then he explained at length that the job was difficult, that he could not do it without good health, and so on. John knew this himself. He did not want to embarrass Nathan with his emotions. John thanked him politely for his attention and said goodbye. Meanwhile, millions of other people on the planet were going on with their lives. Some people were successful, their dreams came true, and nothing was threatened for it. Like Julia, she didn't get much sleep tonight either. She didn't get insomnia from worrying like other people do. It's the anticipation of tomorrow that kept her awake. Julia is the only and immensely loved daughter of Kevin Borisovich, a successful entrepreneur. She was lucky to be born into this family. Julia's mother has aristocratic roots. She received an excellent education, had feminine wisdom, and a calm character. Thanks to this, the daughter grew up a real princess. Julia was the girl who never let her parents down, while at the same time, herself from this did not suffer. She had time to go to all extra classes. She easily managed to win in all competitions. And in between, she was fond of cooking and always surprised the guests of the family with exquisite dishes in her adolescence. Then she successfully entered the Faculty of Finance and graduated with a red diploma. The dynasty of financiers has grown a worthy heir. Her father Kevin owns several firms and is famous for his charitable projects. Of course, Julia will inherit all these riches on the rights of the only heiress. While still a student at a private elite school, Julia met Sam. Between them arose at first platonic love. After school, they started dating and feelings grew into passionate love. Sam never disappointed her. He is also the son of a rich family and has brilliant prospects. Recently, Sam officially introduced Julia to his parents, and they gave their blessings for their marriage. Julia is looking forward to the day. Her excitement today has nothing to do with that. She has long dreamed of having an exhibition of her paintings that she paints in her spare time. Recently, her father decided to give her such a gift. He entrusted the organization of the exhibition to his assistants. Julia found out about it when almost everything was ready. All that was left was to place the paintings in the city's artist's house and prepare for applause. Kevin had sent invitations to all the influential people in the city. There will be press, there will be stars and journalists. This will be Julia's first time performing in front of such a large audience. Sam will be there, of that she has no doubt. At this time in the same city, student Kira was facing a big change in her life, and of course did not know through what events her path would cross with these people. "Mom, you can congratulate me. Found a job," said Kira, who had just come from her studies. Her mother was greatly surprised. "Daughter, what need do you have to work? You study in medical school. Study takes so much energy and time from you. Your father and I provide you with everything you need. Why do you need a job? How long can I sit on your back? I'm old enough to take care of my own problems." "That's not the point. You should put all your energy into studying to become a good doctor. You know how much responsibility this profession entails, don't you? If you miss something now, it could affect someone's life in the future. That's what you have to think about," your mother said. "I'm thinking the same thing. My new job is directly related to my future profession. There I will gain practical experience. I will see real hospital life and doctor's life," said Kira with enthusiasm. "Wait, so you got a job at the hospital? How did they get you if you're still in school?" "I got a job as a nurse." "Daughter, are you out of your mind? Your father is a professor of medicine. Your mother is an academician, and you're going to work as a nurse. Here we go again. Here we go again. Aren't nurses human beings? I think it's the kind of job where you can fully immerse yourself in a real medical atmosphere. No, you've got to give it up before your father finds out. He's definitely not going to approve of this move. Mom, it's up to you. Dad listens to you for everything. If you say it's the right thing to do, Dad will support it. So try to understand me right now. I believe you won't have any trouble convincing your father of that," Kira said. Her mother sat down on the sofa and clutched her head. "What's the need for all this? You don't need anything. You're getting your knowledge at university. There will be time for practice." "You'll just sputter now," said her mother, not hiding her bewilderment. "Anyway, I want to be independent. You and your father don't want to admit that I'm already 20 years old. I'm an adult," said Kira in an offended tone. The mother realized that further arguments with her daughter were useless. In her stubbornness, she took after her father. If she decided something, she would stand the end. So she decided to postpone this conversation until the evening. That evening, at the family dinner, the mother herself was the first to bring it up. "Father, your daughter wants to combine school and work. She says she's taken a job as a nurse at a dispensary for the handicapped." "Tell her that's not a wise decision," the mother said. "Kira, is it true?" Father asked. "Yes, Dad, it's true. Please don't change my mind. I'm ready to take full responsibility for my work and studies," said Kira. "Of course, we don't doubt your responsibility. but in your case it looks very stupid. The professor's daughter works as a nurse in a dispensary. It doesn't even sound right. I advise you to cancel this decision, or I'll have to call your supervisor, and he'll have to fire you," the father said. "Whatever you want, I'll stick to what I want." Kira said yesterday, put her fork in her plate with a clatter, then abruptly stood up and went to her room. The next morning, the mother found a note on the table. It was left by Kira. In it, she apologizes for her firm adult decision to leave home and live an independent life. Julia's exhibition was a huge success. She was recognized by the public. Some of the paintings she managed to sell for a lot of money. It seemed that there was no one happier than her in the world. But even the happiest days were ahead. A couple months later, she and Sam got married. Their married life held no unexpected surprises. They both enjoyed each other's company and continued to give each other their love. Such a perfect relationship is what millions of people dream of, and these two young people never had to suffer in this relationship. On one such day, Julia felt ill. She had felt that periodically she had strong moments of fatigue before, but she wrote it off as fatigue. This time, she noticed that her body was giving serious signals of irregularities. She didn't put off going to the doctor for long. A long examination did not reveal any serious illness. The doctor prescribed Julia more rest, vitamins, and sent her home. But even with plenty of rest, Julia's health continued to deteriorate. There were no specific signs of illness, so she restarted the study. One of the doctors delicately recommended that she check with an oncologist to rule out the possibility. Julia was horrified by this recommendation, but for the sake of formality decided to take the tests. When all the results were ready, she took half an hour to drop by the doctor's office and show him that everything was normal and the cause should be looked for in something else. But I had to stay a while at the doctor's office. The elderly doctor asked various questions and shook his head, scrutinizing the results of the analysis. "I must tell you that the cause of your illness has been found. You should have come to us in the first place," the doctor said. "What does that mean?" Julia was horrified. "The fact is that there is a neoplasm in your pancreas. I understand that it does not cause you any trouble, but that's the insidious thing about this disease. It doesn't manifest itself until it's fully advanced," the doctor said. "Does that mean I have cancer?" "Doctor, is there some kind of mistake? Maybe I should have another test. If you'd like, you can go back for another test." "Well, all the tests here lead to that diagnosis. I don't think there's any mistake," said the doctor. Julia sat in the doctor's office and couldn't feel her body. The ground was falling away from under her feet. "Doctor, just tell me honestly, will I survive? Is there still a chance of salvation?" Julia asked. "I can't give you a guarantee, but we will do everything we can to maximize your life and its quality. But the treatment will not be easy," the doctor said. Julia walked home on wobbly legs. She thought her life was just beginning, and there were so many wonderful things ahead of her. She had never had any unhealthy habits. How had this disease chosen her? And why at such an early age? It was only when she was hospitalized that she learned that oncology does not choose a person by any characteristics. Here you can meet the youngest and most successful, cheerful and energetic, who were caught by the disease in the most interesting place of life. Everyone was shocked. Julia's parents and her new husband, Sam. They'd all made a friendly decision to help Julia fight for life at any cost. And there were other events ahead. Having gathered everything necessary in one backpack and leaving a note on the table, Aubrey went wherever she was going. She didn't have any plans except a great desire for an independent life. Suddenly, she saw a frayed piece of leather lying on the sidewalk in front of her. She picked the thing up and saw that it was actually an old wallet. Inside were several neatly folded bills and a black and white photograph of a handsome man. Kara realized that someone had lost a valuable item and must not have noticed it yet. She held the wallet in her hands and quickened her steps to outrun all the passers-by, hoping to catch the eye of the wallet's owner. She had only taken a few steps when she heard a voice very close by. "Ah, there he is. I always lose it. said an elderly woman with snow-white hair and a sunny smile. "Grandma, is this your wallet?" "I found it over there," said Kira, holding it out to her. "Don't shout so loudly, my hearing is fine," Grandma said in a whisper, looking around. As she got closer, Kira felt a slight tingling sensation all over her body. It was a strange sensation. She had never felt it before. "I'm sorry, I saw the picture there and realized that this thing was precious to you," she said. "It is, but there's more to it than that. You didn't come here for nothing, did you?" The grandmother asked with a mysterious smile. "Yes, I should be looking for a place to live, but I decided to take a walk," Kira said. "So I'm not wrong. Come on, I'll show you the apartment, and you decide whether you like to live in it or not," said the grandmother. Kira was glad to be so lucky. She would not have to call a huge number of people and run across the city trying to grab the slightest opportunity. And if they could agree on money, it would be perfect. The grandmother with snow-white hair was walking along at a brisk pace. Her steps were quite brisk for an elderly person. They entered one of the entrances and went up to the second floor of an old Khrushchev house. Despite the old wooden door inside the apartment, the atmosphere was quite different. Very bright and spacious, several rooms with minimalist decoration. "I rarely come here, but I always find time if necessary." "How do you like it?" "I like it very much. It must be expensive," Kira asked. "Yes, very expensive, but you don't have to pay. If you like it, then just settle down and live your life. The rest will happen," she said and smiled enigmatically again. "What do you mean you don't have to pay?" "I think it's unfair." "Don't worry, I'm solvent. My parents put enough money on my card every month," said Kira. "It's not about the money, forget it. Now I have to get a move on, they're waiting for me." "You'll find everything you need in your places," said the grandmother and hurried to the exit. "Excuse me, but what is your name?" The grandmother thought for a moment, then gave Kira her wide smile and said, "Well, call me Grandma Cindy." "Nice to meet you, Grandma Cindy. My name is Kira." "I know," said the grandmother and left. Kira did not have time to ask how she knew her. And in general, a very strange woman. She catches passers-by on the street and lets them into her apartment for free. Sarah has been worried for 3 days about her son Oliver not answering her calls. She and her husband recently bought a separate apartment for student Oliver and separated him from themselves. The parents hoped that the spoiled lad would become more responsible and independent. But the hassle only got worse. Since Oliver lives separately from the medical university, his father's acquaintances began to call more often and ask why the son of such respected parents fell in academic performance. The parents guessed that the son has gotten involved with bad company and it's really distracting him from his studies. Guidance wasn't helping. The last time Oliver was in touch with them was 3 days ago, and today the teacher reported that he did not attend the university for 2 days in a row. Sarah's all worked up. Trying to talk to her son seriously is getting her nowhere. He's the hope of a medical dynasty. He needs to finish university and become a good doctor to inherit from his father a famous medical clinic in the city. Sarah decided to do things differently this time. She started dialing her husband's number. "Jack, Oliver's teacher called, says he's not showing up at the university. I think you should take the time to stop by and see him. I'm asking you to talk to him like a grown man to a man." "I'm running out of arguments," she said. "Sarah, honey, you should have thought of that before. You lost your son. You should have paid more attention to him when he was a teenager instead of following me around to find out I was unfaithful." "So much for the consequences," Jack replied. Sarah knew the conversation would go therefore scripted. She had to listen silently to her husband's rebuke at first, then still insisted that he talk to his son. Returning from work, Jack knocked on his son's apartment, but he had to wait quite a while. He was not going to turn around and leave, as he had already seen from the yard how the lights were on in all the rooms of the apartment. Moreover, while he was standing outside the door, he heard stomping and rustling inside the apartment. So the son was home. Tired of waiting, he pulled out his key to Oliver's apartment and opened the door. A pungent odor of booze hit his nose. Clearly, his son wasn't wasting any time. Jack walked into the kitchen and saw the typical scene on the table: empty bottles and plates of food. As he stood looking at the mess, he heard a voice behind him. "Hello, sorry, we're in a bit of a mess." Jack saw the tall, wrapped woman in front of him hurriedly getting out of the shower. He looked at her in surprise and couldn't figure out who she was. The woman was clearly not in Oliver's circle. She was closer in age to Jack's own years than to young Oliver's. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Jack asked. "My name is Eve," the woman said, and walked toward Jack with her hand outstretched. "What are you doing here?" Jack asked, not sure how to give his hand to the strange woman. "Has Oliver told you anything about me? My name is Eva. Oliver and I have been dating for 6 months, and we're serious," the woman said. "Okay, Eva, you're going to get dressed and go to your house. There you'll have plenty of time to think about why you shouldn't pair up with a kid who could be your son," Jack said. "Wait a minute. How is it possible that you're a young and modern man and your views are medieval? Have you ever heard that there can be sincere and great feelings between people? In this case, age doesn't matter," Eva said. "You can make all the arguments you want. Maybe Oliver is just having fun with you. It won't last long. It's almost over. And now you're free to go," Jack said, and headed for the bedroom. By this time, Oliver had woken up with a terrible, lingering vigor and was trying to remember what had happened before and what day it was. He saw his father in front of him and was a little taken aback. "Father, why are you here unannounced?" "Son, why don't you explain to me why no warning works on you?" "Come on, Dad, don't start. I've got a headache. Did the teacher call?" "Don't worry. I'll handle it," Oliver said. "It's late. I don't see the point of further negotiations. Clean yourself up immediately and pack your things. You'll move back in with us. Your mother and I will rent or sell the apartment. Independent life is obviously not good for you," my father said in a menacing voice. "Dad, don't jump to conclusions. It's all right. I haven't given up studying. Sometimes I skip classes, but I finished all my exams on time. You're wrong about moving out. I'll have to start living on my own at some point. If you keep this up, you can forget about the clinic. Finish your studies and go to the bottom of the ladder, doing clinic duty and dressing wounds. No private clinic with a well-established reputation and client base for you," my father said. "I promise it won't happen again. Try to understand me, too, because I'm 22 and I'm not a kid," Oliver muttered to himself. "Speaking of the baby, who is this madam?" Jack nodded his head to the side. "Oh, you mean Eve. That's an old friend of mine. It was her birthday, so I threw her a party at my place. She'll be here for a couple more days, and then she'll go back to her place," Oliver said. "Why is your old friend old enough to be your mother?" Oliver sat silently because he didn't know what he saw in an older woman. "Well, she and I have a great rapport," he mumbled under his breath again. "People like her only look for naive simpletons like you to get access to your money. I'm sure you've been telling me all along that you're the head of a private clinic. Things will be different from now on. If you want to continue living apart from us in this apartment, forget about this woman. And yes, so that you don't get drawn into pathological relationships in the future, find yourself a normal girl from your university and marry her. When you're a model student and head of the family, maybe we can revisit the clinic issue. Until then, you're grounded. I'll give you a month. If you bring a normal girl, we'll talk again. If you want to keep hanging around with grandmothers, you'll have to make your own career," Jack said, and headed for the exit. He looked at Eva again, trying to remember where he'd seen this woman before. She looked familiar. "Eva, what do you do?" asked Jack. "I'm in the arts." "What kind of art?" "I'm a dancer." "Where do you dance?" "Theater." "Ballet?" "I dance in a nightclub. The whole town knows me. He's got the spotlight on me." Now Jack remembered where he'd seen this woman. Indeed, the whole town knows her. She is a famous stripper who has been performing in various nightclubs for several years now. There was a time when Jack's own friends bragged about how they managed to get this Eva for one night. Apparently, the ratings of Eva since that time has not fallen. since now the turn came to his son. After the collapse of all hopes, John has been confined to a wheelchair for 6 months. Doctors have recommended various methods of treatment, but mobility in his legs has not yet appeared. The formerly active and enthusiastic boy is now forced to look out the window all day long and watch the lives of other people. His mother and father try to distract him in every possible way, reassuring him that he will soon be cured. But John has less and less hope. His favorite girl, Natalie, from the first days did not leave him. At the hospital, she walked him, helped him change his clothes, and never let him doubt his strength for a minute. After he was discharged home, Natalie started visiting him at home. Talk of the wedding itself died down. John realized that it was unlikely that a young, healthy girl would want to tie her life to an invalid, even if she loved him. Who needs such a burden? After 6 months, Natalie's visits became rare. John counts the days until she arrives. Today marks the end of the 3rd week since Natalie has not called or come to see him. John's only hope is for his upcoming birthday. Maybe, out of pity, she'll make time for him. Son, your father and I have decided to celebrate your birthday at a nice restaurant. We'll invite your closest friends and co-workers, and you'll have a good time, Mom told him. Mom, maybe we shouldn't. Who'd want to waste time at some cripple's birthday party? If I could be of any use to them, I'd have something to look forward to. I'm just begging for their attention, aren't I? Don't say that, John. That's what you think because of your time constraints. Actually, people are very understanding. They'll even be happy to cheer you up. So go along with it. It'll be fine, your mother assured me. What about Natalie? She's been gone 3 weeks. I have no right to call and demand her attention. Why would she want me like this? Inviting her to a birthday party will make her show up and pretend like everything's normal. What about Natasha? She's still good to you. She said it's going to be a busy time at her job. Don't worry about unnecessary thoughts, or Natasha will come to you, her mother reassured her. Parents tried to organize everything for John's birthday party at the highest level. At the appointed hour, they arrived at the restaurant and waited for the guests. John's mother waited most of all for Nathan, who had once held her son in high esteem and saw in him a bright future. The support of such a person would be very helpful now. The first people to arrive for John's birthday were his former colleagues. John was surprised, as he had expected them the least. When they had worked together, there had been a lot of stuff going on inside the office, and sometimes they had to put the screws to each other in order to get favor with the management. John was no stranger to that either. He thought that these people held a grudge against him and were happy about his new disability. Turns out that wasn't the case. As the evening approached the midpoint, John received a phone call from his former supervisor. For some reason, John thought his former boss wanted to tell him that he was on his way up. I actually overheard another conversation. John, I wish you a happy birthday. I gave my present to the driver. He'll bring it home. Don't be offended. You know I have a lot of things to do. I couldn't come to see you. Soon I'll find a window in my schedule and we'll have a friendly sit-down. And today I wish you all a good evening, said the manager and hurried to say goodbye. Whether the former manager was so busy or not is not known for sure. But John decided that the invited guest did not come on purpose because he was now a useless burden for everyone. And it was impossible to change his mind. Indeed, only 5 of the invited 20 people showed up. When John was tired of waiting for the others, he turned to his mother. Mom, you were talking about Nathan. What did he say to you? He asked. His mother had tried to avoid this question for so long, but she had not succeeded. She would have to tell the truth. Son, don't take it personally. Nathan said he's meeting with some important partners tonight. He'd asked me to say hello to you, but he couldn't make it himself, your mother said. Everything became clear with this man, too. But John decided not to ask any questions about Natalie. He realized that he couldn't take another excuse from his loved ones. Natalie never showed up. The arriving guests wished John well. They noticed his low mood and tried to leave the evening before it was over. At the end, only his parents, his grandmother, and John himself stayed until the end of the party. The next morning, John woke up and regretted it. A crushing heartache prevented him from even breathing quietly. He suddenly realized that every morning he opened his eyes in pain and wished that the night's sleep wasn't the end of the whole nightmare. What upsets him the most is Natalie. Their relationship is fading before his eyes. John wants to talk openly about it, but at the same time he is afraid to hear the truth. Natalie does call that day. She wished him a happy birthday, apologized for preferring other plans. I understand you, there's no need to make excuses. Any decision you make, I will respect. I understand my situation and I don't want to be a burden, John said, even though he had promised himself 1,000,000 times before not to fall into the victim image. No, you don't have to feel that way. You just know that I'm always here for you. It's just that I'm in a period of time where I need to spend more time on my work, Natalie said lastly. In principle, John had no questions. While he was absorbed in his heavy thoughts, someone knocked on the door. Mom went to open it. It sounded like one of her friends. Ed, you've fallen off the team, haven't you? We decided to go on a picnic as a team for the fall holidays. Here I came to tell you in advance so that you do not have time to come up with an excuse, her friend told her mom. No girls, this time without me. You know, I'm not my own person. I can't leave John alone. Though I'd love to rest, divorced in the arms of nature, answered the mother. Mother, I'll stay home alone. Father will come in the evening and we'll manage together. You'd better go on vacation, John shouted from the living room. But Mom didn't agree to go on vacation. As they sat down to dinner, John noticed that his mother had more gray hair than she had a few months ago. It's all because she's worried about me. Not only am I useless, but I'm dragging other people down too, John thought. From that day on, he was rapidly falling into depression. If he used to wake up early in the morning and try to move his lifeless legs, now the blossoming guy turned into a vegetable. His appetite is gone, and at night he sobs like a baby instead of sleeping. If his mother doesn't follow up, he won't take his pills on his own. He stopped answering phone calls from old friends. When people come to visit him, he closes himself in his room and does not come out to see them. His mother and father try to distract him, but they didn't pay attention to the fact that in the guy's head you have borne an insidious plan. Julia finishes the 3rd course of treatment, and her life also changed dramatically. All plans have had to be put away in a distant drawer called If You're Lucky. Today, she goes to the doctor to find out the results of the last test after the next course of chemotherapy. She waits with bated breath for some positive news from the doctor. There were not many people in the doctor's waiting room, so Julia went in at once. The doctor was scrutinizing her tests as usual. What is it? Any changes? She asked hopefully. How do you feel? Do you feel any changes? The doctor answers as if delaying an unpleasant answer. To be honest, I don't know what torments me more, my illness or the chemotherapy. If we compare with the initial period, in principle, the tumor has stopped growing. But this may be a temporary effect. I would recommend surgery, the doctor said. Julia was most afraid of that answer. During her treatment, she has studied a lot of information and heard all sorts of stories. Usually after surgery, the condition of patients deteriorates significantly. You can forget about your quality of life. Maybe that's not true for everyone. Doctor, how effective will the surgery be? Unfortunately, no one can give a 100% guarantee. In any case, it will be an attempt to do something. In general, if you get a few more courses of chemotherapy after the surgery, the cancer cells die completely and you can talk about victory, the doctor said. Julia has been afraid of medical manipulation all her life. What to speak about surgeries when she was hysterical at the mere sight of syringes? Well, life has forced her to do it, and now she gets a bunch of syringes a day. And now her fear of surgery is insurmountable. She is convinced that surgery is just another way to postpone the imminent end. On her way home, she decided to take a walk. She walked down the street and greedily experienced life. She hadn't noticed before that ordinary, everyday life could be so beautiful, and that even a big city held some secrets. It was amazing to realize that in this huge flow, one person's life meant nothing. Even if his life is cut short right now, this active movement and the hum of the city will not stop for a second and will continue its course. While she was thinking about all this, she tripped lightly over some small object. Turning around, she saw an old leather wallet under her feet. She pulled it out. It was folding. It wasn't hard for her to see the picture of a handsome and young man in the wallet, and of course, a few neatly folded bills. Julia decided that someone had dropped it and was probably looking for it. As she stood and looked around, she didn't notice an older woman with gray hair appear next to her. "I suppose you are looking for the owner of this wallet?" she asked, and looked at the wallet with a smile. "Yes, it's yours. I guess it was lying right under my feet," Julia said, and handed the wallet to the older woman. "Do you seem to have some important thoughts?" the old woman asked. "Well, how can I put it? I just want to have time to look at this life," Julia said, and put her arm around the older woman's shoulders. "I understand, but all is not lost. I was in a similar situation myself many years ago." "You were. I think the medicine was weak then. But how did you manage to cure yourself?" Julia asked with interest. "And medicine plays a secondary role here, as it turns out. It's your desire that determines a lot. I see you have a lot of it." "That's right, my life is just beginning. It pains me to realize I can't even plan for the future. I wish I could. I won't keep you long. I'm here to tell you the most important thing. If you want to get something, you have to give others something very valuable to you. Do you understand?" Grandma asked and looked at Julia with a smile. "What I need most of all is hope, so I should give hope to others. You are a good girl. I believe that you are really ready to win. You know the way, so follow it. I have to run. I have a granddaughter who lives in my apartment," the grandmother said and hurried away. Julia had only one idea in her head: to give hope to others. But how to do that? She listened to her heart and heard a faint clue, but she decided to follow it. The quiet voice of her heart led her to a church on the outskirts of town. She prayed and asked God to grant her health and life, and she stayed in the church until her heart was firmly convinced of the best outcome of the whole story. Oliver decided to leave class early today, as he was bored sitting through the boring anatomy lectures. He called up his friend, and they decided to go for a drive around town in his car. "Oliver, why aren't you in the mood?" his friend asked. "Yeah, my dad's been bothering me. He's threatening to take my apartment and rent it out to the newcomers. And I don't want to live with my parents again. We won't have a lot of time. We have to do something," Oliver said. "What do they want from you?" "They want me to find a normal girl. They want me to marry her and learn to take responsibility." "What are you going to do?" "Where am I going to go?" "I don't want to sit in a clinic after school and see pensioners. I want to run my father's clinic. There's a normal flow there, not the last people there. There's a professional team. That's what I mean, a career. So there's something to aspire to. You have to get married for that. It's not that simple. You know that stripper from the club, her name's Eva." "Oh yeah, she's not a young girl." "How not young?" "About my mom's age. Anyway, she says she's in love with me. But I've been talking to her, she's all right with me too. She doesn't get cranky, she doesn't give me a hard time. Unlike the younger ones, she understands and supports me in everything. Except that my father caught us in the apartment together and put the question on the table. I need to end it with her and show my parents a normal girl. Well, they offer you a normal option. You find a normal girl, introduce her to them, and if they want you to marry her, she will live with you and take care of you. And with your Eva, you can see in a club or in a hotel. But everything will be with you, in the clinic, and parents will be happy, and a wife and a mistress," said a friend and laughed loudly. "But to find a girl who will like them, that's not a problem at all. Look who's coming. You can tell she'll make a good wife. I think she goes to our university. Why don't we go over and meet her?" I think I've seen her a couple times before. I'm going to try to make conversation. If anything, you vacate the front seat. I'll take her for a ride around town," said Oliver and hurried towards the girl. Hi. Hi. You're a school dear, right? I have a school dear too. Have you ever noticed? My name's Oliver. I'm Kira. I'm sorry. I didn't notice you before. Is your class over? Maybe we could go for a ride. I'm free for a couple hours. Unless I'd have to get to my work. I don't have much time, Kira replied. On the way, they chatted about their studies. Kira was smart, but not as interesting as the stripper Eva. But Oliver didn't forget about his goal for a second, so he actively kept talking to her. And when they arrived at one of the city hospitals, Kira hurriedly said goodbye and ran inside the hospital. They'd agreed to meet in the evening when Kira was free. Oliver didn't even ask why this girl was coming here. Their romance was developing rapidly. Kira had never been as intimate with anyone before as she was with Oliver now. Longing for her parents was replaced by confidence in the delights of adulthood. Oliver was quite adept at dealing with the female sex. Therefore, he had no trouble entering Kira's life and even finding a place in her heart. At first, Kira couldn't believe that her first love had come to her. But each time, scrutinizing the face of this cheerful young man, she more and more convinced herself that this is the real female happiness. She never burdened him with her current affairs and problems. He had no problems in life. A couple months later, Oliver told his parents that he had met a nice girl and they were in a serious relationship. Jack and Sarah were overjoyed. Now they began to insist on meeting this girl. When Kira heard about this proposal, she had no doubt that Oliver was her destiny. Today, Kira's work shift was hard. In general, Oliver charges are considered heavy patients. Most of them are bedridden and in constant need of help from others. In addition, people with disabilities become moody and cranky over time. It is sometimes difficult for their loved ones to cope with them. Kira had a unique talent to find a common language with each ward. Tonight, there was a conflict between two patients. A middle-aged woman accuses a young girl of stealing her commemorative comb. The girl assures that she did not see any comb. At first, there was a verbal altercation between the two. Then the girl could not stand the neighbor's outbursts and threw her mug at her. The neighbor threw the mug back at the girl. As a result, the girl received a serious injury to her eye. Kara found out about everything only when the noise was raised. She ran to the room and started to find out what had happened. By that time, both women were out of their minds. The girl was screaming and crying like a small child. The woman was inconsolable that the one wanted to hurt her. "Barbara, how can you throw yourself at a man when you can solve everything by talking? Everyone here hates me. And you hate me too. Of course, we're all useless people here. But some of us even here don't want to realize that. Instead of being supportive of each other, they're willing to tear up the nearest neighbor. I think they deserve to die. They deserve a painful death." The girl continued to wail. "And you, Aurora, why didn't you call me first? We could have looked for your comb together. Why do you think Barbara stole it?" "Because she asked me for it 2 days ago. I let her use it and she wouldn't give it back. That means she didn't have a comb of her own. So you did a good deed for her. But then you decided to charge her for your kindness. Is that how you mean it?" Kara asked in a stern tone. "Well, I didn't mean it that way. I wanted her to always ask me." The second patient began to justify herself. At that moment, the door opened and another nurse on duty came in. "Kara, why do you need to babysit them? Would you rather I call security and have the guys help calm them both down?" "Trust me, they're better at dealing with these kinds of issues," the nurse said. Both patients immediately realized what fate awaited them. The guards are usually not ceremonious with anyone. That's why they're very afraid of that word. "No, there's no need. We'll settle this peacefully. Right, girls?" Kira asked and looked at the conflicting neighbors. Yes, we'll work it out ourselves now," both women said hurriedly. In the morning, As Kira was leaving the hospital grounds to go shopping, she stopped purposely at a small cosmetic store. She got 2 combs and brought them to her charges. "Here's one for both of you. Now you won't have to fight with each other," Kira said. Both women were very happy with even such a small gift. Kira finally found time for other things and headed for the staff room. Suddenly, she heard sounds in the head doctor's office. "I don't want to torture them with my existence. Because of me, my parents have to deny me everything. Friends put a cross on me, held a birthday party. Almost none of them came. There was a favorite girl. She gradually disappeared from my life. I've become a burden to everyone, so I want to spend my last days here, without complicating the lives of my loved ones," said the young man. "Why do you have the impression that you are making life difficult for them?" asked the doctor. "I feel it. The day will come when they will say it to my face. I don't want to wait for that day, so I decided to leave home voluntarily. Accept me, and I want to stay here," said a young man in a wheelchair. "All right, we'll take you in. Just keep in mind that you have a good chance of getting back on your feet and returning to a full life. You'll have to take good care of your health here. We'll try to help you with that." "No, I don't believe in that anymore," the young man said and cried like a child. Kara realized that the new resident of the dispensary had come here on his own. Judging by his words, he has a depressive state. That means that she should establish contact with this patient and be as attentive to them as possible. Thus began John's new life under the same roof with the disabled. Julia spent the whole night thinking about how to be useful to others. In her case, it would not be easy. She herself can barely cope with a progressive disease. But she was determined to show the world that even in this condition she had fortitude and was willing to be of service to others. This would strengthen her motivation to recover at the deepest level. In search of like-minded people, she came to a supportive community for cancer patients. She asked to volunteer. In fact, the volunteers here are those who are themselves suffering from cancer at some stage or the other. Her task is to periodically visit elderly patients to help them organize their life and leisure time. These people have proved to be in high demand here. On her first day at work, Julia received a call from a woman asking for help. She complained that she was seriously ill and had nowhere to go. Julia decided to visit the woman. When she arrived, she found a lonely woman with disabilities in an old abandoned house. It was unknown how she had survived without help before. "I had a son who took care of me in some way. Recently, he had an accident and died. I signed the house over to my son a long time ago. Now my daughter-in-law wants to build a new house here, and I am in the way. She sends people every day and demands that I vacate the house," the woman said and cried. Darga realized that the woman clearly did not have the energy for a showdown. Now she needed to take care of her health. She consulted with her supervisor and decided to help the woman to be accommodated in a dispensary for the disabled. On the same day, Kira witnessed a second person being brought in. For her, these are normal working moments. She didn't bother with this woman, as it was supposedly her daughter who was next to her. But the next night shift turned out to be a turbulent one. The newly arrived woman was in severe pain. Julia stayed by her side. In the middle of the night, she ran to Kira asking her to find a doctor and examine the sick woman. "It's impossible now. We'd have to wait until morning," Kira replied. "But she is in unbearable pain. She needs strong painkillers. The person is suffering. Think of something." Julia was inconsolable. "Girl, we see how difficult it is for your mother. But now it is technically impossible to get the necessary drugs. We will deal with this issue first thing in the morning," Kira answered her. She was sure that Julia was the caring daughter of this woman. Their acquaintance had come much later. "I feel sorry for her. Bodily pain is one thing, but she's also in mental pain from being kicked out of her home," Julia told her mentee's story. "How did you let this happen? Didn't you have anyone else close to you to protect you?" Kara asked in surprise. "Me? I have loved ones. I'm fine. I'm in my ward." "Isn't she your mother?" "No, I'm just a volunteer." My mother and father are healthy, thank God. I volunteered for a volunteer organization to make it count as my yes to life. I understand you. You're caring for a complete stranger, right? What made you do it? I'm diagnosed with cancer myself. There's a little time for observation, and if there are no positive changes, we'll have surgery. It's a big one. I'm really scared. Do you know what it's like when you're just starting out in life, setting big goals and having big hopes, and then bam, you're diagnosed? It's like a cruel joke of fate. I met this woman on the street and she made me realize something very important. I have to help others deal with their illness in order to conquer mine. In short, I just want to live. That's all. I understand you. You deserve all the praise and respect you can get. I'm sure you'll be fine. You will recover and live a long life, said Kira and hugged her new acquaintance. So this is where you work. I hope the atmosphere of the place doesn't put pressure on you, because you are still so young. Julia asked. No, not at all, because I realize that I have to be strong enough to withstand such manifestations of life. I'm studying to get a doctor. My parents are medical scientists. They've been so dedicated to medicine all their lives, too. Why here? You would have easily gotten a job at any other hospital or even a private clinic. I think this is the real face of reality here. In private clinics, of course, comfortable, many of the horrors of our profession just do not see. But here, the disease is intertwined with real fates. I'm interested in learning all this, enthusiastically told Kira. I'm finishing my shift and you hang in there. I still have time to clean up. I have a big night tonight, she added. Do you have a date? Not exactly. Meeting my favorite person's parents. Wow, that's really important. Don't stay here too long and get ready, Julia said. Kara hurriedly headed for the locker room. Passing by the sanitary room, she noticed a strange picture. Some of the guests of the dispensary headed to the treatment room in a wheelchair and actively looked around, as if hiding from someone. Kira began to discreetly observe further. The man waited for the nurse to leave the treatment room, then drove into the office. When Kira came to the doorway, she saw the man hurriedly going through the medications in the nurse's open safe. What are you looking for in here? Kira asked. John hadn't noticed that he was being watched earlier. Therefore, he was startled. I was looking for my pills and they didn't give them to me today, so I thought I'd look for them myself. He came up with an idea. You don't have to get them on your own. You will go to your room and you will wait for the nurse, Kira said and rolled John's wheelchair. Kira looked closely at the fading guy but found no suspicious signs. Later, the nurse counted the medications in her office and made sure none of them were missing. Kara believed that the guy had really come for the pills. Now she headed to the locker room with peace of mind. No sooner had she reached the mirror than she heard the exhausted screams from the ward. She ran back in. A young man in a wheelchair, who had just been looking for his pills, was lying on the floor bleeding. Kara didn't immediately realize what had happened. As luck would have it, the head doctor wasn't there. Kara came closer and saw that the young man had cut himself with something. Kara wanted to call for help, but she couldn't find anyone from the medical staff. It was with great difficulty that she was able to lift the guy off the floor and put him in the bed. He was conscious and crying like a little baby. The guy was wailing that he wanted to get out of his life and end this torment. Here, Kira remembered the doctor's words there, that she should be as careful as possible with this guy. The doctor had said he was in an acute stage of depression, and anything could happen. She had to stop the blood from the wound and bandage it herself. Fortunately, the wound was shallow. Then the guy was sedated and put to sleep. Kira realized that she was going to have to rethink her plans. She dialed Oliver. Hey, sweetie, we've been waiting for you here for a long time, Oliver said in an affectionate voice. I'm sorry, I don't think I can make it tonight, she said. Next time, my parents might not be able to make time for you. You and I planned this evening 2 weeks ago, so what's the excuse now? Oliver was losing his temper. It's a long explanation, I'm sorry. I'll call you later, Kara said and hung up. Oliver was extremely angry. He was going to introduce Kara to his friends today. He was already exhausted from trying to make friends with a girl he wasn't interested in. She always seemed too boring to him. Eve was different. It was good to have her in his life. Oliver decided to distract himself from his anger and dialed her number. A woman's voice answered on the other end of the line. "What do you want?" Eva answered a little snidely. "Honey, I've missed you. We need to see each other today," Oliver pleaded. "The meeting isn't until after my show is over. It'll be closer to midnight." "Wait at your apartment, I'll be there," Eva said. "No, you don't need to come. Dad's still mad from that time. He wants to break us up. Now you and I need to meet somewhere neutral for a while," Oliver replied. "Look, I don't like to go to hotels. I like the comforts of home. I think you're a mature guy who can work things out with your parents. And after all, it's your apartment, right? Why do they manipulate you so much and you fall for it like a kid?" said Eva. Oliver hung up the phone and thought, indeed, Eva saw through everything. Parents always find a way to impose their opinions. If before it was just persuasion, now that he was older, it was blackmail. Still, it's good to have Eva around to point these things out. Thus, there was a sharp protest inside Oliver about his parents. Kara was nervous when Oliver once again invited her to meet his parents. She'd never been particularly confident, especially after a long shift at the hospital. When they arrived at Oliver's parents' house, Jack and Sarah greeted them with smiles and hugs. They managed to chat about all sorts of things along the way. "It was a tough shift, saving a man from suicide," Kara said. "What a job you have. But this is reality. The other side of reality, where illness changes destinies and people. I want to be a specialist with a capital letter. That's why I got this particular job," Kira said. Oliver flinched and looked at Kira with surprise. He knew she worked at the hospital, but he had thought she handled less heavy tasks. He had never talked to her about it, and this was news to him. They quickly reached the huge mansion where Oliver's parents lived. "Well, hello, son. Good to see you. And this is your girlfriend, Kira, the one you told us about," said his father, trying to lighten the mood after that unpleasant conversation. "Yes, Dad, this is Kira." "What a nice girl. Nice to meet you, Kira." "Nice to meet you, Sarah." They sat down at the table and began to talk, discussing various topics. Kira tried to be friendly and cheerful, but her nervousness was still evident. Oliver noticed that she was often distracted and uninvolved in the conversation. Oliver decided to lighten the atmosphere and suddenly turned the topic of conversation in an unexpected direction. "Mom, Dad, I'll tell you where Kira works. She works as a nurse at the hospital." "Nem, how interesting. What kind of tasks do you have to do there, Kira?" asked Sarah. Kira started to get even more nervous. "Well, it's not a very interesting job, but someone has to do it, right?" Yes, it's true. It's so interesting that sometimes Kira can't get out of this hospital," Oliver added sarcastically. Jack noticed that his son was overstepping his bounds. "Why, it's not so bad. Any labor is useful. I suggest we change the subject," he said. Oliver didn't want to shut up. "No, of course not, but Kira herself is always complaining that it's such a boring job." Kira felt her face turn red. She felt uncomfortable and awkward when Oliver suddenly wanted to talk about her job. She wanted to say something in her defense, but the words wouldn't come. Sarah tried to smooth things over. "Well, Kira, this is such important and noble work. You're doing a very important job," Jack added. "Absolutely right, Sarah. We're proud of you, Kira." Kira felt a little better when her parents accepted her work with respect. Oliver still wouldn't let go of the situation. "Well, you, of course, no offense. It's just that I didn't know you worked in such a lowly position before," he added. Kira felt tears welling up in her eyes. She set the cup of tea on the table and stood up. She said goodbye to Oliver's parents and quickly walked out of the house. Oliver stayed with his parents and tried to explain why he had made a joke about her. The next day, Kira arrived at work and began to reflect on last night. She was disappointed in Oliver and didn't know how they would continue their relationship. She sat in her office and suddenly heard someone calling her name, and it was Sarah. Kira, there was a misunderstanding at dinner last night. I came to talk to you privately. I used to work in a hospital, too. I was a surgical nurse and I loved it. So don't think Oliver's words are true. He's very easygoing. I'm sure you've noticed that, her mother said. Kira smiled. She realized that Oliver wasn't a bad guy and she loved him. She decided to give him another chance. After a few meetings with Sarah, Kira had become firmly friends with her. Oliver's mother insisted in every way possible that their relationship continue and grow. It turned out that Sarah was well aware of her son's flighty nature. Of course, Kira did not know that at home every day Sarah and her husband discussed their relationship. The father believes that a girl like Kira is the only chance for their son to grow up and learn responsibility. In fact, Kira is the perfect match for Oliver because she is also a future medical professional. Kira had been prioritizing her work, but now she was paying more attention to Oliver. Tonight, they were going out together. Kira decided to give herself a chance to rest, but she could never get comfortable spending time around Oliver when she thought of her patients. So that those people would not suffer in her absence, Kira decided to make an arrangement with Julia. Julia, you are already your own man here. I have a small favor to ask of you. Could you look in on John's room more often tonight? Make sure he doesn't get any sharp objects in his hands. We also need to make sure he doesn't get his hands on anyone else's drugs. He could drink them and accomplish his goal, Kira said. Don't worry, I'm thinking of talking to the guy myself sometime, Julia promised. Kira took a flying gait and flew off to meet her lover. Julia tended to the sick, helping some to eat and some to change. In the evening, she made sure that everyone drank their pills and went to bed. When the ward was quiet, she sat down in the foyer and finally allowed herself a cup of coffee in complete tranquility. But it wasn't to be. After a while, she heard the quiet squeak of wheels. It wasn't hard to guess that it was the wheels of a wheelchair. Julia began to watch further. The same depressed guy, John, was looking around before wheeling his wheelchair out of the room. Julia bent lower at her desk and it was hard to see her. The wheelchair moved slowly and headed towards the treatment room. When it disappeared behind the door, Julia followed. Through the gap in the doorway, she saw the guy hurriedly pocket some medication and hurried back. Stop. What do you want here? Julia asked John. He was instantly angry that he had been caught again, but he didn't confess his intentions. Instead, he turned on the victim again. I felt sick, so I decided to take a sleeping pill. I didn't want to bother the nurse to get tired of dealing with us all day. What if it's not true? Julia asked. If you don't believe it, that's your business. I need to go to my room, John said and rolled his wheelchair into the room. Julia followed him. When he pulled into the room, she followed him in and closed the door. You take over, I'll take a look around, Julia said, then crossed her arms and stood in the middle of the room. I'm going to complain to the doctor about you. What do you want me to do? Actually, you should have taken care of me. Brought me sleeping pills. John tried to get rid of the intrusive girl's attention. Don't lie to me, I know you're tired of living. I know all you've been doing lately is trying to get out of life. So you can't fool me, Julia said. John was taken aback by these words, since no one had ever allowed themselves to talk to him like that before. He had long ago realized that people are willing to comfort endlessly if you show them your weakness. So instead of actively pursuing treatment and getting back on his feet, he's busy finding an affordable way to commit suicide. You know, I feel unwanted and superfluous everywhere, and yet somehow I live. Before I was a blossoming man, I was on the road to success. I had grand plans for my life. One day, it all came crashing down and I turned into a vegetable. Who would want me like that? Before John could finish, Julia cut him off. I know you've been trying to kill yourself for a long time. Is that true? She asked, looking him straight in the eye. That's true, but I actually went to get some pills right now. I wanted to sleep better and not wake up at night, John said. That's all secondary. Let's talk about your plans. Do you really want to die? Maybe I can help you, Julia asked. Are you kidding? John looked at the girl with incomprehension. No, I'm not joking. I suggest you take a walk with me. Just you will tell me everything, Julia said, and without waiting for his answer, rolled the stroller towards the exit. She led the stroller along a large highway where rare cars were rushing by. They traveled a decent distance while John talked about his former life. It was very strange having such a life story, not to want to continue it. As I understand it, you were promising as a specialist. You had loving parents that you gave up on yourself. You built strong relationships that can build more. And as soon as you were put to the test and needed a little persistence and patience, you decided to resent the whole world and give up on life itself. I guess I don't understand something about it, Julia said and swerved the stroller into the driveway. Then she leaned over and locked the wheels of the stroller. When she was sure it was stationary, Julia stepped back to the sidewalk. John was left completely bewildered. Hey you, what do you think you're doing? Unlock the wheels. John started to get indignant. Don't even ask. You've been wanting to get out of your life for so long, make it look like an accident. Then your parents will have a chance to forget about you someday and won't spend the rest of their lives wondering what they did wrong. Then the hospital management won't have any complaints about me not looking after you that night while they were busy with more difficult patients. If you want to leave such an encouraging life, then leave it in such a way that no one gets hurt because of your stupid decision, Julia said and sat down on the sidewalk. Are you out of your mind? Can't you see how fast the cars are going? I do, that's why I brought you here on purpose. Any other car could be the death of you. So accept it with dignity. You're really crazy. I'll complain to the doctor tomorrow. You'll be fired. No, you should go to jail. How do you abuse an infirm person like that? John shouted. He continued his outrage at the top of his voice. But not all his words reached Julia. While he was shouting, another car was speeding toward him. John looked at the light of the headlights and suddenly pleaded with himself. He closed his eyes tightly and gripped the rail of his wheelchair with his hands. A moment later, he was shaken by the strong wind, and then the noise died down, followed by the disappearance of the car's headlights. What do you think? Death just blew right past you, yet your hair was ruffled by the wind of the flying car. How does it feel? Julia shouted. You're insane. Just now I was barely alive, and next time it might not be. It will be on your conscience, you lunatic. Julia remained indifferent to his outrage. She just sat on the edge of the sidewalk and looked at this man, who in an instant had gone from suicidal to another person, who was desperately fighting for life. John, I'm offering you a deal. It'll be good for both of us. You give your unnecessary life to me, and you take my impending death. I think that's fair. Everyone gets what they want, Julia said. I don't get it. What kind of a trick is this? Shouted John, who was sitting in a wheelchair in the middle of the road. I am figuratively speaking to convey something very important to you. We've been having a heart-to-heart talk for almost half an hour, and you've never once asked me why I should bother with you and listen to your complaints. Meanwhile, I'm comparing them to my reality. You want to know? You're just doing your job. No, I'm a financier by trade. I was born into a finance dynasty, which means I could spend my life counting big bucks. I was really going for it. Then one day I got a diagnosis that put the whole course of my life into question. And now, for 8 months, I had been fighting hard for life and convincing myself every second that God hears my prayers and will not take my life at such an early age. I really need life, and if you don't need it, let's switch roles, Julia shouted back at him. Well, sorry, I thought you were the new staff here. I sympathize with you about the illnesses. I think you're giving up hope for nothing. I know a lot of people who've made a full recovery from an incurable diagnosis. Believe me, with such a courageous character and stubbornness, you will definitely win, said John, already changing his tone to a more friendly one. "Well, that seems to be the deal. Are you ready to go back to your room and think about your position in life? Ideally, you should go back to your parents and work hard on their health. I've read your story. You have a real chance of getting back on your feet," Julia said. John sat in silence. Julia realized that he was thinking about something very important, which meant that the process was underway. A person can't accept important thoughts at once, so you have to let him live with the idea for a few days. With these thoughts, she got up from her seat and went to the wheelchair to take him back to the hospital. Seeing the headlights of another car flying towards them, Julia quickened her steps. All she had to do was make a couple simple movements to get John to the safe side of the road. But this car was going seemingly much faster than the other cars were passing. The next moment, Julia heard a loud rattle of metal and a lingering creak. The light of the headlights disappeared and total darkness reigned all around. She ran in the direction the car had rolled after flipping several times along the road. As she got close, all she could see was the wheels of the car in the air as it continued to spin. The air was filled with the smell of burning rubber. She pulled out her cell phone and called her colleagues for help. There was no time to wait for a medical ambulance. Judging by the moans, there were several people inside the overturned car. But where was John? Julia was horrified when she imagined the possible scenario of the collision. He could have stayed under the car with his stroller or fallen into the deep hole that runs right past the road. But John and his stroller are nowhere to be seen. Of course, Julia would be severely penalized for such an experiment and would have to answer to the law. But she was more worried about John than anyone else. Her colleagues who arrived on the scene carefully pulled the passengers out of the car. There were two of them, a young boy and a girl, both unconscious. "We don't have time to go to the trauma center. Turn to the dispensary, there we will give first aid, and then we'll see," said one of the dispensary staff. And so we did. Bloody two young people, a boy and a girl, were placed in one of the wards of the dispensary. Because of the profuse bleeding, the doctors were not able to recognize their faces immediately. And when they did, they were all shocked. In the girl, they recognized a young nurse, Kira, who had already managed to love for her diligence and curiosity. And the guy next to her face was familiar to everyone. He often came to the hospital to pick up Kira. What a miracle that they survived. "They are about to get married," said the doctor to her colleague, dressing Kira's wounds. "Really? How long has this girl been working for us?" asked another. "About a year, I think." "And you didn't pay attention to her last name and middle name?" asked the first one. "No, I didn't. But her face is very familiar, as if I had seen her as a child somewhere, or so it seems to me," said the second. "It may well be the daughter of a very important person," said the second. "Why does she work here as a nurse? Is there no better position for her?" The first one asked again. There were decent places, but she didn't want to go there herself. "I think her father sent her to us on purpose to get the information he needed," said the second. "Did you see that guy's last name? He doesn't come from an ordinary family either. If so, when this girl comes to her senses, someone should talk to her," said the first. "What? What is there to talk about?" "This complicated guy has a very bad reputation. The girl is promising, and the family has a good reputation. So, a friendly word of advice to warn her. Because she's young, she's probably fallen for his words," said the other one. "It could well be." Kara opened her eyes and tried to figure out how she had ended up in the bed for her patients. All she could remember from last night was how they had rushed in Oliver's car after their evening walk to her patients. There was no way she could calm herself down and decided to make sure each of them were okay one more time before going to bed. Oliver was a little puzzled by this, as he generally didn't like her being so attached to her patients. So he pressed the gas to the fullest. Then they saw a dark silhouette on the road, and there was a crash. "Kara, how are you feeling?" Julia asked, who had been sitting next to her the whole time. "Julia, I don't really remember how it happened. It's a miracle. Your injuries are minor and Oliver's fine. and our John's fine, so he's got his brain back in place. But I'm going to be severely punished, Julia said. How did you end up in there anyway? I wanted to teach that John a lesson because he tried to take pills again yesterday. I took him out to the big highway and put him in the middle of the road. I wanted to let him know that his desire to quit was really just a deep inner resentment against life. I wanted him to feel how precious life really is, especially when you're on the road to death. Why are you being so hard on him? He could really kill himself, couldn't he? He has a deep depression, and apparently his character was very vulnerable, so there's no way he could psychologically adapt to reality. There's nothing wrong with him, really. He and I were almost able to come to an understanding. I told him my story. He thought about it. Just as I was about to drive him off the road, a car jumped out. That's when I found out it was you and Oliver. How's Oliver doing? Where is he? Kara asked. Oliver's fine, so don't worry about anything and rest. I have to get ready. They're probably coming for me now, Julia said. Who's coming? Are you going home to your place? No, the cops are probably coming. John was going to complain that I endangered his life, and the accident was my fault. Don't worry, I have nothing to be afraid of, Julia said and headed for the exit. A few days later, Kara asked to share a room with Oliver. That way they would be less bored. Oliver's injuries weren't serious, and he was counting the days until he would be allowed to go home. On one of those days, the head doctor of the dispensary came into their room. Well, young people, are you getting better, or should I transfer you to the traumatology to treat you properly? Asked the doctor. Kara and Oliver answered that everything was fine, and they would return to their normal life in a few days. Well then, Kira, you have a little business to attend to. All attention to the door, please, the doctor said solemnly and gestured towards the front door. The door opened and an elderly man with glasses walked in. Edward, here is your daughter. Watching her labor process, I had no doubt that you, as a professor of medicine, have raised a worthy daughter. In addition to her primary work, Kira had a keen interest in learning patient protocol. When we were sure that the girl had enough knowledge in her field, we allowed her to draw up her own protocols for each patient. And what do you think? Her rates were the highest, and not just in her specialty. For example, she worked hard on a paralyzed guy, and now this guy can partially walk on his own, all thanks to Kira's efforts. Our volunteer, Julia, who was diagnosed with cancer, is also successful. Kira was not just friends with her colleague, she followed the progress of treatment of these people and our other patients. I am sure that in the person of Kira, our medicine will soon be a very valuable staff member, said the chief physician. Well, if that's true, then good. And so my daughter is stubborn, long ago stopped communicating with us. It is all her personal merits. Well, Kira, convinced of your adulthood, maybe enough adventures, move home. Your mother misses you, said Professor Eduard Grigorievich, and stroked his daughter's head. Oliver was at a loss. Kira had never said who her parents were. Here now he had no questions left. Here his parents would be surprised that she was the professor's daughter, which meant he was getting one step closer to his goal. 3 days later, they were both discharged. Oliver hurried home. Kira went to her place. It was only in parting that she said, Oliver, I realized something important. I'm sorry, but I don't see a future in our relationship. I hope your parents will be understanding. So goodbye and take care of yourself. Oliver stared at her in bewilderment, but he didn't push for an explanation. On the contrary, he felt relieved that he would no longer have to pretend to be a loving boyfriend. The court hearing on Julia's case was held in public. Everyone was present. The staff of the 2 hospitals, a representative of the volunteer organization, Kira and Oliver and John. The trial was proceeding on a regular schedule. Julia sat quietly behind the bars, waiting for her turn to say her last word. Defendant, it's time to hear your side of the story. Can you tell us why you took the victim out into the roadway and left him in danger? Your Honor, the victim had been planning to pass away for a long time. I wanted to give him that opportunity in the safest way possible. First of all, I didn't want the young specialist, Kira, who was responsible for him, to get hurt. So I chose a day when Kira wasn't at the hospital. If he had swallowed pills, and this had happened more than once, the main nurse would be behind bars, and his parents could spend the rest of their lives bemoaning the fact that they couldn't keep their son from committing suicide. That would make it look like an accident. But, Your Honor, in the course of this plan, something changed dramatically in the other direction. For the first time, the victim dialogued and changed his position. That's where my story came in. "What is your story?" the judge asked. "My story is that I am in the opposite position to the victim. I have been given a very pessimistic diagnosis. The details are in the documents at your fingertips. In short, it remains to be seen whether or not I will be alive in a year's time. But I really want to live. For 9 months now, every move has been to get my life back on track, to regain my confidence that there is time ahead to make plans and to dream. So I told all this to our victim and offered a symbolic deal. He leaves life in agreement with his choice, and then maybe I stay alive if human desires are destined to come true." Just as we solidified our agreement, a car appeared on the highway and collided with a wheelchair. But it was like that at first glance. As you may know from the case file, the victim was not actually injured. There was no direct collision with the car and his wheelchair. The car slid into his stroller and John was thrown to the side of the road. But while medical personnel were busy rescuing the young people in the car, no one noticed the victim. He managed by his own efforts to get out of the hole in which his stroller had fallen. He also managed to somehow get back to the hospital. As he told me later, this incident gave him confidence in his abilities. Therefore, I plead guilty to having confronted a man with a real death and thereby helped him avoid it. Let the decision be at your discretion, and within the law, Julia finished her speech. "Will the defendant please tell me what is the state of your health now?" the judge asked. "I have consented to the operation. It will be a decisive step. But the operation is possible if the court authorizes it," Julia said. "I'd like to address the victim, John. Do you have anything to say?" The judge turned to John. "Yes, Your Honor, I do. After what happened, I realized a lot of things, and I came to the conclusion that I had in fact shown weakness of character for a long time. The defendant, Julia, was an incredibly brave young woman. I believe she was in a state of desperation at that moment. She was desperately fighting for a chance to live. Thanks to her efforts, I realized that my situation was not the worst. And most importantly, I was convinced that I could walk on my own. Now, as you can see, I can partially move around without a wheelchair. I would like to thank Julia very much for this lesson and ask that she be released from the courtroom." "I have no complaints about her at all," John said. Then, after a few formal procedures, the court read out the decision that Julia was released from the courtroom. 2 months later, she was operated on by Professor Edward, assisted by a young specialist, Kira. Already in 6 months, Julia was able to return to her former life.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.